Welcome to Dead and Roasted. What can I get you?
Have you ever actually seen a redwood tree in real life? Those things are enormous. Imagine if you just grew a random redwood tree in your yard. Yeah, it'd take forever to grow, and you would probably die of old age, but your neighbors would be so ticked off. And imagine the tire swing, your kids would love it. Or I guess it'd be your kids, or something. Speaking of the redwoods, I have an assortment of scary work stories for you tonight, featuring witches in the woods, something that looks like but isn't a dog, and things that live in the redwood forests that take people. Enjoy. If you like what I do here at Tales from the Break Room, be sure to follow and review the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you like woodsy scary stories, get my new book, Creepy Campfire Stories, on Amazon or via the link below, or just go to creepycampfirestories.com. And if you have a scary work-related tale, I want to hear it. Send it to me at eeriecast.com/submit. Thank you. Now then, these are tales from the break room. My dad and I met a witch in South Korea. From The Flash Hawk. When I was in high school, I lived on a very small island off the coast of South Korea called Jeju. My parents were international teachers. My dad was a math teacher for high school, or Key Stage 3 and 4, since it was a British school. The island was very beautiful, but quite infamous for its forests. Not only were they dense, but they also carried a rough history. During World War II and the Korean War, thousands of locals had been hunted and killed by the tyrannical powers of the time. It was a truly terrible history, one the people weren't soon to forget. Many believed the forests and surrounding areas were haunted. My dad and I weren't so quick to believe in such ideas, but we did find them interesting or exciting. We loved camping and often camped at designated campsites or on the beaches with other families. One year, deep into winter, we decided to push our luck and go camping regardless of the cold weather. My dad suggested we camp near an abandoned YMCA center. Yes, in the middle of the forest on a rural Korean island. I, of course, thought this was a terrible idea and objected, but we ended up going anyway. When we got there, we found a nice place to camp, set up our tent, and made a small fire. It was probably close to freezing then when it started to rain. At the time, I was really not enthused and desperately wanted to leave. The combination of the freezing rain, haunted forest, and nearly abandoned center was really pushing my limits. Nonetheless, we decided to stay. The night was cold, and even so, the sounds of nature kept me awake until late, probably around 1 a.m. I don't remember falling asleep, but I do remember my dad shaking me awake early in the morning. I got up quickly, worried something was wrong, but he just wanted to show me something beautiful. The rain had turned to snow. The dense jungle-like forests were blanketed in white, not something you often see, since the tropics don't generally get much snow. One thing that made Jeju quite unique. Though the view was wonderful, I soon dozed back off to sleep. Maybe a few hours later, the worst possible sound you could hear in the woods suddenly shook me awake. Not a scream, a roar, or any ambiguous noise. It's a sound everyone knows. A car alarm. Why the heck would our car alarm be going off way out here? The only answer seemed to be human tampering, right? Armed with a shovel and a pocket knife, my dad bravely went to check the car and see who or what was causing the commotion. I was so tired I just went back to sleep as he walked away. "Psst, wake up," my dad said from outside the tent. I wasn't sure how much later it was. I got up groggily and put my shoes on. "What is it?" He told me it wasn't our car. For whatever reason, someone else had parked way out here, probably to check out the abandoned building. When we got there, we found a minivan and a woman sitting by a bucket with a small fire. My dad introduced us. Apparently, they had been talking for some time before he woke me up. She seemed to be on the younger side, maybe late 20s, and she definitely wasn't dressed for the weather. Just a sweater and jeans, even in the icy, snowy conditions. She introduced herself with a Korean name I honestly don't remember, except for the fact when I told this story later to a Korean friend, he said that the name meant something like magic or witch cat. He said it was a name only really used in fairy tales, like meeting someone named Rapunzel or Hansel. Besides the name, she said she also had a black cat wandering the area, like a cliché witch. One thing I found weird was that the firewood she used was completely dry, even though it had rained and snowed all night. She even had a pile of extra dry wood behind her. Strange, but not explicitly supernatural. After she introduced herself and we chatted a bit, she told us some stories. Weird and sometimes disturbing stories. I remember her proudly talking about making a fire to cremate some roadkill in the middle of the city. Super strange things. After an hour or two, we decided to pack up our stuff and leave. We said our goodbyes and returned to our camp. We gathered our things and headed back to the car. When we got there, she and her van were gone, but now a black cat was sitting prominently in the abandoned building. It had this little red collar too, so it was definitely owned, not some stray. When we looked at it, I swear it bowed to us, as if acknowledging or waving us off. Both my dad and I, to this day, agree the cat was likely her, and that she was definitely a witch. It was a surreal experience, and it's nice to know that if witches truly are real, they aren't necessarily malicious. Haunting in a ski resort. From Malzano. It was my first winter working at the ski resort, mostly doing maintenance work, keeping an eye on the lifts, and making sure nothing went wrong during the night. The resort was small and old, but it had a certain charm that attracted visitors looking for a more quiet experience. My routine was simple. I would make my rounds and check the equipment. Then I would just wait for the dawn shift to relieve me. On this night, a blizzard had rolled in unexpectedly. The wind was stronger than usual, and the snow was piling up fast against the lodge windows. I didn't mind so much. It wasn't the first storm I'd seen up here, and I figured I'd just have to stay alert in case anything needed attention. Around midnight that night, I was in the lobby, sipping some coffee and waiting for my next round, when the radio began to crackle. "Mike, you there?" This was someone who worked at the front desk during the late shift. I'll call her Sarah. "Yeah, what's up?" I replied, leaning forward to grab the radio. "There's a guest complaining about some noise coming from one of the empty rooms on the 3rd floor. Can you check it out?" I didn't like that. The 3rd floor was mostly vacant this time of year, and with this storm, no new guests had checked in for the night. "What kind of noise do you mean?" "Not sure. She said it sounded like someone moving around up there. But the room she's talking about, well, it's supposed to be empty." I grabbed my flashlight and stood up. I felt a bit anxious about this. "All right, I'll go check it out." The stairs creaked under my boots as I made my way to the 3rd floor. I remember seeing the lights in the hallway flicker a bit. Creepy, but I told myself it was just an old building quirk. Maybe even the storm affecting the power. The 3rd floor was colder than usual, the kind of chill that gives you goosebumps, even when you're indoors. The room Sarah mentioned was at the end of the hall, room 309. As I approached, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. I stopped in front of it, my heart picking up speed. The guests weren't supposed to have access to this floor. It had been closed off for renovations, and the rooms hadn't been used in years. I pushed the door open with my flashlight and stepped inside. The room was dark. The curtains were drawn tight, but the cold hit me immediately. It was way colder than it should have been. I flicked on the flashlight and scanned the room. Empty, as expected. A bed covered in a dusty old quilt, a small desk in the corner, and a wardrobe against the far wall. Looked like it hadn't been touched in years. I took a few steps inside, my breath visible from the freezing air, when I noticed something that made my stomach sink. There were footprints. Footprints as clear as day in the dust on the floor. But they were small, like a kid's, and they led from the wardrobe to the window, where they stopped abruptly. I shone my flashlight on the window, expecting to see some evidence of a break-in. But the glass was frosted over, untouched. There was no way anyone had come through there. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the flashlight. I walked slowly toward the wardrobe, every nerve in my body telling me to turn around and leave. But something kept pulling me forward. The air was so cold now, it felt like it was seeping into my very bones. I reached the wardrobe and hesitated, my hand hovering over the handle. I took a deep breath, and I pulled it open. Nothing. Just an old coat, covered in dust, hanging limply from the rod. But there on the floor of the wardrobe was something else. More footprints leading into the back of the wardrobe, as if someone had walked straight through it. I took a step back, my mind racing. Obviously, that didn't make any sense. There was no other way out of the room, no secret door. I had checked the resort layout 100 times for renovations. The walls were solid. Suddenly, the door to the room slammed shut behind me. I spun around, my heart beating out of my chest, and I rushed over to the door. I yanked on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if the storm outside had locked it shut, sealing me within. I called out then, but my voice didn't go far. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Footprints. They were no longer still. The dust around them shifted like someone invisible was walking toward me. The soft patter of feet faint but unmistakable. I backed up against the wardrobe, my pulse racing. The flashlight flickered then. The footprints stopped just a few feet in front of me, as if whatever had made them was standing right there, staring at me. The air felt thick, like the room itself was about to crumble. I fumbled for the door handle again and yanked it hard, and finally, it gave way. I burst into the hallway, slamming the door shut behind me. I could barely breathe, but I didn't stop. I ran down the stairs, the cold clinging to me, not stopping until I reached the lobby. Sarah was down there, looking at me like I was crazy. "What happened?" she asked. I shook my head and tried to calm myself down. But the image of the footprints kept flashing in my mind. I don't know. Room 309, it's not right. It's not empty. We called in the manager, and a few hours later I was off my shift. By then the storm had died down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone during that time in that room. I didn't go back to the 3rd floor again, nor did anyone else. Room 309 stayed locked from then on, and I never got an explanation for what I saw, or what I didn't see. All I knew was that something was still up there, waiting in the cold. And sometimes, when the wind howled just right, I swear I could hear the faint sound of footsteps coming from up there. They. From James. I've sent this story to another podcast, but didn't get a response. However, I'd really like to get my story out there. Information, maybe. A reason to go back to a mountain I grew up around. Who knows? They. This was late in 2009, in a small town on the coast of Northern California. I know when most people think Northern California, they think Bay Area. No, there are about 300 more miles of Northern California. So northern, it's about 15 miles from the Oregon border, nestled in the Redwood National State Park. Beautiful for sure. However, living there all my life, I know the beauty of nature can also be dangerous. This was during a time in my life where financial issues just seemed to be everywhere. So, being a husband at the time and a father of 2 kids, there was no way I was going to let them go without. Those days I was out of work, due to an injury. And well, I'm not the type to sit down for too long. Able to physically do the things I love, but according to work, not ready for the physical demands of the job just yet. I decided I would start picking some mushrooms and some bear grass. They're native to this area, and people pay good money for them. It's something I would do at the time regularly for some enjoyment and some extra cash. So to the hills I went. Now, to get to these areas of bear grass and wild mushrooms, it's a bit of a hike, sometimes miles and miles into the thick forest. This particular spot was just north of the Oregon border. My friend B was there. B and I headed up the hills with a husband and wife couple, friends of his. We'll call the husband C, and I can't recall his wife's name as this was the first time I've met her. A bit of a backstory on B and C. B is from the country of Laos, and C is from Cambodia, each with a string of cultural beliefs. I was born and raised in the sticks, an Indian reservation kid, so I have my own as well. And I've had my fair share of crazy, unexpected, and unexplainable things happen in my life. This will come into play later in the story. They come over here about 3 months out of the year to work picking, and the rest of the year they head home to enjoy their earnings with their families. The spot we were headed to was miles and miles off the grid, through meandering dirt roads in the mountains where it would be so easy to get lost. It was like a maze. This mountain specifically has 2 roads, one going to the north of the mountain, and the other wrapping around the south end, never actually meeting up for at least 10 to 15 miles. B and I took the north end, as C and his wife took the south. Divide and conquer, we thought. This is B and I's side of the story. We headed to the north side as we watched C and his wife take the south turn in their late 90s Toyota Tacoma, with a camper installed in the back for cooking and sleeping when needed in the mountains. As we drove for a few miles looking for signs of bear grass or mushrooms, we found a spot. Regarding that spot, to the south of it was the mountain and to the north was a small cliff. As we parked on the dirt road, to get out and take a look, we leaned over the side of the road and the cliff went down into a half-circle shape it looked like, and went down a couple 100 yards. We saw bear grass everywhere. It was like we hit the jackpot. Excitedly, we headed down to collect our reward. Mind you, C and his wife are now on the complete opposite side of the mountain. As we make it down to the base of the half circle, there was another drop that went to the north end with even more. But I'm not going to be greedy, you know, so I decided to start picking where I was. Now, when you pick bear grass, you have to be careful. The stuff can be really sharp, and you need some thick gloves. You grab pretty close to the base with a small handful, twist it around your hand, and pull it out, making a distinct ripping sound. I would say about a good hour went by, as B and I were now on opposite sides of the circular cliff working away. I would stop from time to time to listen for the ripping sounds, so I could keep track of where B was at. As some more time went on, I stopped to listen for B. This time I heard the same ripping noise, coming from a few hundred feet down into the second cliff area, as mentioned before. I thought, that's crazy, because he was just to the left of me on the other side of the cliff. But now he's down there? B at the time was in his late 60s. Very in shape though, and very fast. But not that fast, I thought. I continued to collect bear grass, leaving a trail of small bundles. That way I could find my way back the way I came. The forest was very thick here after all, and covered with undergrowth under the huge towering trees. This was something B taught me, as I was used to cutting the limbs of trees to help me find my way back. So I was working along and it was getting pretty close to lunchtime. I started to make my way back up to the truck, up on the road, picking up my bear grass bundles along the way. It was then I heard a rustling sound from right up ahead. I looked up and saw a bush in the undergrowth, which was about as tall as me. I'm 6'1" and 218 pounds, so a good-sized undergrowth bush. It begins to just shake, and I mean violently. Again, I've been in the forests, particularly that forest, my whole life. And that was no bear. No mountain lion either, which are quite common in the area. I didn't have a firearm with me at the time, like I normally would, which was stupid of me. I dropped my bundles of bear grass, and my pack, and I took off towards where I last heard B. Getting close, I stopped and began to listen for the sound of ripping bear grass. I still heard the ripping noise from down the cliff, so I just decided to yell for him. "B!" I called out. "Jim?" I heard B reply, not where I heard the ripping grass coming from. I asked him if he was here the whole time, and he said, "Yeah, I have plenty here." I asked him, "Then what the heck? Who the heck's down there?" I pointed down the cliff. B cut me off and said, "Jim, don't curse. They don't like that." He pointed towards the empty woods and waved his hand around a bit. I thought, who are they? B was trying to calm me down a bit, chalking it up to a bear or a deer. However, I didn't think it was that. We decided to stick together for the rest of the work, just in case it was some large predator. We made our way back to the truck and had our lunch. We decided that we had enough daylight to just check out another place just up the cliff from the truck. We track on up from the truck, now heading up to the cliffside. We're just going back to work when, out of nowhere, we began to hear this loud music. It's rare to hear anyone out that far, but not unusual, since at the time, a lot of illegal weed grew up there. So you'd hear a car or two maybe within a 10-hour period altogether. This music, though, it sounded Hispanic, I guess. I'm sorry if my explanation is lacking. There was a bass guitar coming from the road where our truck was parked, which would mean it was coming from the north side of this mountain. We didn't think about it much, and really didn't think it would be important. However, it would be later. We soon got to a good stopping point. We would come back up here tomorrow at the same spot, as there was plenty more bear grass to get. That, and by then whatever was in the bushes or making that sound from down the cliff would likely be gone by then. We start up the truck and head to a mutual friend's place. That friend had a contact with a flower company from the town about 2 hours south. He would pay a bunch of people, around 15 or so, to pick the grass and the mushrooms and pay you on the spot. We would take all our stuff and sell it to said company. There was a bonus too. He would feed all of us, and boy was the cooking good. And there would be shots of whiskey to go around. We arrived at the house and figured C and his wife would be behind shortly. As we weighed our bear grass to see what our profit might be for the day, minutes turned to hours and there was no sign of C or his wife. People do get lost in these woods all the time. I would say on average over 5 or more in a year. And unfortunately, most of those people get the worst outcome. You see, in the redwoods, it can be a nice 60 to 70 degree day, but at night, the temperature can drop to hypothermic conditions. We were beginning to get worried, thinking we might have to go look for them. We started to head up the hill to start the search. It was nearly 11 p.m. by then, and none of us were strangers to searching for lost people in the woods. Personally, I've been a volunteer to search parties before. But just as we were all about to head out, headlights came down the driveway, and there we saw C and his wife pulling up. Right off the bat, I knew something was up. C was not driving, and his wife didn't have a driver's license, and really didn't know how to drive anyways. So why was she the one driving? My immediate thought was some type of injury happened. However, when C got out, he was very shaken up looking, but there wasn't a scratch on him. I was even more confused then. So what the heck took so long? We all started to head back into the garage, where we had our way stations and whiskey shots. We helped C inside as much as we could. As we entered the garage, we set him down on a stump. The stumps were leftover fallen trees we would yank and make chairs out of. So yeah, we finally got him seated and somewhat settled. Through stutters and broken English, he tried his best to tell us what happened. This brings us to C's side of the story. We'll start with where we went our separate ways, around the hill. C and his wife drive a few miles into the forest on the south end of the mountain. They found a place that was loaded with bear grass like we did, and decided to stop there. C would go on to the forest to hunt the bear grass, as his wife and dog would stay at the camper. She would cook his lunch up right there, which is pretty good cooking too, if I have to say. C's wife would then bang on the bottom of a bucket, making a loud noise to alert C that it was now lunchtime. So that being said, C went off to start his search. As he was doing the same thing we were, leaving bundles of bear grass to find his way back to the road, he was picking on the south side of the mountain, also on a cliff. He decided it was close to lunchtime and should start making his way back. He knew it would take him a bit to get there, and he wanted his food hot. As he was picking up the bundles of bear grass, they just disappeared. This frustrated C. He had never gotten lost in the woods before, but now it seemed he had. Otherwise, someone was out there playing tricks on him. Just in case, he began to yell out, specifically curses and threats to possible pranksters. Now remember, my friend B told me not to curse at them, whoever they are, and he was cursing much more than me. He walked for hours trying to find any sign of his bear grass, or if anything looked familiar. But as time went on, the sun was starting to set. He was really getting worried then. He knew about the dangers of being in the forest after dark. Now, sometime before that, when it was getting close to lunchtime, C's wife went and banged on the bucket as usual. She said she'd waited half an hour, but there was nothing, no sign or no sound of her husband. She said she thought forget it and was going to head in to look for C herself. But just as she decided that, she heard a voice that sounded exactly like C. "Go back to the truck," it said. Freaked out, she listened to the voice. As time went on, she said she knew C was out there lost somehow, but the best thing to do would be to stay put and hope C came to her. Back to C, who was stressing out about the soon-to-be lack of daylight. He had no idea how far he was now from the road, from his truck. At some point, he decided to sit on the ground and pray. C is a very religious person. He's a Buddhist. He said when he was done praying, he listened to the sounds of the forest. It was then that he started to hear music. As he explained the type of music he heard, the description matched what I said. The same tone, the same cultural region. But how was that possible? We were on opposite sides of the mountain. When I heard the music, it was coming from the road I was on, which was on the north side. And he was on the south, and had heard it coming from his south, towards his truck. How is that possible? C said that he then decided to follow the music. He only heard it for a while, but kept following that same direction even after it ended. He went for hours in the dark with no flashlight. He then finally came to a dirt road and decided on a direction to go, not knowing which would take him to his truck. It was a gamble, really, but luckily for him, he gambled right, and he found his truck. He was so upset by then that he couldn't drive, which is why when we saw him, his wife was in the driver's seat. I've got to say, after all this, I definitely was second-guessing going back up that mountain, which we planned to do the next morning. But B wasn't worried. And I did need the cash still. I really needed to feed my family, after all. So I thought, screw it. I gotta do what I gotta do. So I headed home and got ready for the next day. The next morning was the same thing, except C and his wife would not be joining us. We headed up the mountain to the same spot we were at the day before. However, when we got there, B told me to stay close. He said to me, "They like you, so stay close to me." Again, who the heck are they? Either way, as long as I was close to another person, that would make me feel a lot safer. There's safety in numbers, you know? With the two of us picking bear grass, I made sure to keep B always within my sight, at least barely. I went to work. I was really in a hurry this time because I did not want to be on that mountain any longer than I had to. I kept thinking to myself, if I go fast enough and I'm doing a good enough job, I won't need to come back. Now, mind you, I was thinking those things, not saying them out loud, thinking them. And out of nowhere, in this deep, demonic-sounding voice, I swear I heard it come from right in front of me.
Good.
I freaked out. I took off running, getting close to B as he was already looking over to me, after hearing apparently the same thing. He said, "That's it, Jim. You need to stay right by my side." I was waiting for the word "they" again. However, it never came out of his mouth this time. As the day went on, I was stuck to B's side like glue. As it grew to be late into the afternoon, we both decided it was time to have some food. We started back to the truck. We got there, grabbed our lunches, and were ready to eat. B sat down on a rock and strikes up a cigarette. He starts to give me some crap because I was putting my potato chips inside my sandwich. Guess it was his first time seeing that. Just then, as I looked up, B was letting out a puff of his inhaled smoke. I saw right beside him a bush that was beginning to part, like someone took their two hands to push it aside to peek through. I swear I watched the smoke leave his mouth, and like some sort of slow-moving wind tunnel, the smoke began to pull into the bush, like something else over there was inhaling it from a distance. B saw the look on my face, then looked at the direction I was peering into, and he saw it as well. As soon as he looked, though, the bush closed back up, and the siphoning of the smoke stopped. B and I were both now equally freaked out, and could not get in the truck and away from there fast enough. We even left bundles of bear grass behind. We sped down the miles of dirt road as fast as we could. Eventually, I finally asked him, "You kept calling them they. Who are they?" B then said we would talk about it as soon as we were out of the forest, safe at our friend's house. Mind you, I've seen many things I can't explain. However, the key word was seen. With that in mind, I never actually saw the thing doing this, or things with an S. I really just saw some weird after effects and heard crazy things. But that was plenty by then. Finally, we get to the house, and I get to know what they are. In B's culture, they believe that when people go and get lost in the woods, which happens a lot from where they're from, and they pass on, their spirit stays in the woods, unable to leave. And when you go into the forest and act disrespectfully, or they just simply don't like you, Apparently, even if you curse, they will play tricks on you. Tricks to get you lost, never found, so your spirit can stay with them. Scary, right? B, C, and I have not been nor will ever go back to that mountain. To who or whatever they are, let's not meet again. The Fourth Puppy. From Bridgewell. You can call me Ray. I've been breeding pit bulls on my property outside of Springfield, Missouri. I specialize in blue nose pits. It started out as a hobby that turned into decent side business. I keep the operation small too. Quality over quantity's always been my motto, and it's healthier for the dogs. My main income comes from my construction company, but the dogs have always been my passion. Last October, my prize female, Sadie, had her third litter. I had paired her with a champion male from a breeder over in Arkansas, and I had high hopes for these pups. The delivery went smooth. 3 healthy puppies, 2 males and a female. All had that beautiful blue-gray coat their parents were known for, too. I named them Duke, Diesel, and Daisy, though I knew they'd get their new names once they went to their forever homes. I keep new litters in a heated section of my workshop behind the house. It's got good climate control, security cameras, and it's close enough that I can check on them throughout the night. That first week went normal as could be. Sadie was an attentive mother. The puppies were feeding well and gaining weight, and had real good energy. It was early in the second week, around day 8, when something happened. I went in for the first morning check, coffee in hand, ready to clean up and refresh the water. As I approached the whelping box, I stopped cold. There were 4 puppies nursing there. Not 3, but 4. At first, I thought I must have miscounted the day before, or maybe I'd been more tired than I realized when they were born. But I knew that wasn't right. This isn't a mistake you make several days in a row. I'd been breeding long enough to know exactly how many puppies came out. I'd recorded the whole birth on video for my records, like I always do. This 4th puppy was also noticeably different. While my blue pits had that distinctive gray-blue coat, this one was almost black. Not the glossy black you see in some pit lines, but a dull, dark color, like wet soil. It was roughly the same size as the others, but something about its proportions seemed slightly off. The head was a bit too large, the legs a fraction too long. I set my coffee down and approached it. The pup wasn't nursing anymore, but had curled up behind Sadie. When I reached in to pick it up, its eyes opened, and it looked at me. That hit me wrong immediately. You see, puppies that age shouldn't have their eyes open yet. They usually stay closed until around 10 to 14 days. But these eyes were fully open, alert, with a deep amber color I'd never seen in a pit bull before. Carefully, I lifted the thing. It didn't squirm or whine like the others would. It stayed perfectly still in my hands, perfectly calm, and watched me. Its body felt unusually cool to the touch. Not cold exactly, but not with that vibrant puppy warmth I was used to. I checked for a microchip, thinking someone must have put this puppy in with mine, as insane as that might sound, but I didn't find anything. I checked my security cameras right away. The time-lapse showed nothing unusual at all. No sign of someone entering the workshop. The strange puppy simply wasn't there in one frame, and in the next it was, nestled with the others like it had been there all along. Look, I like stories and podcasts like this, which is why I'm submitting this story to Tales from the Break Room. But I'm still a practical person, so I figured there had to be some sort of simple, down-to-earth explanation. Maybe one of the puppies had a rare gene causing the odd coloration, and I'd just been mistaken about the count. For a while. But I knew that couldn't be true. I knew my dogs, I knew this litter from day one. Over the next few days, I kept that fourth puppy separate from the others as much as I could, setting up a small pen next to the whelping box. I took it to my vet, who's been handling my dogs for years. "Never seen coloration quite like this one," he said. "No obvious health issues, though. Heart sounds real good, temperature's normal." He looked at its eyes and said, "Early eye-opening can happen, but this level of awareness is unusual. You say you just found it?" I hadn't told him the whole truth. I simply said I'd found the puppy and was considering adding it to my program. I didn't really feel like saying it had just materialized out of nowhere. After the vet check, I reluctantly put the puppy back with the others. I decided to call it Shadow for obvious reasons. Over the next week, I watched the litter carefully. The 3 blue puppies behaved normally. They played, they slept in a pile, they nursed and grew. Shadow did all those things too, but always with a strange act to it. It's hard to explain, but the way it moved was much more stiff. I couldn't tell if it was sickly or robotic. But the vet said it was okay. Maybe just a weird dog. It never seemed to sleep as much as the other puppies. Often I'd come in at night to check on them and find the 3 blue puppies sleeping, while Shadow sat awake, and it would watch the door as if it had been waiting for me to come check. By the 3rd week, the differences became more pronounced. My 3 were developing as pit bull puppies should. Playful, energetic things, starting to show those blocky heads and muscular builds. Shadow was changing too, but differently. It remained leaner, its muzzle a bit longer than a typical pit's. Its movements were smoother too, like it was more coordinated and balanced, not at all a clumsy normal puppy. And the dang thing never made a sound. Never heard it yip or bark or even whine. It was just silent. Sadie's behavior really troubled me. She nursed Shadow along with her pups, but she never cleaned it, never played with it. She would intentionally lie so that her body was between Shadow and her other 3 puppies when they slept. I've worked with dogs long enough to know when they sense that something's wrong. One morning near the end of week 3, I came in to find Diesel whimpering in the corner of the whelping box. He had a small cut on his ear. It hadn't been there the night before. Nothing serious, but it still bothered me a bit. The cameras had not caught anything useful, just normal puppy movement in the dark. Shadow had positioned itself between Sadie and the other puppies, nursing while the others huddled together away from it. When I reached in to check Diesel's ear, Shadow stopped nursing and watched me with those unblinking amber eyes. That night, I installed a better camera with night vision and set up a monitor in my room. I woke up around 2 a.m. to check the feed, and I saw Shadow pacing a perfect circle around the sleeping forms of Sadie and the puppies. Not the random wandering of a normal puppy, but a measured circuit. I watched the feed for nearly an hour, as Shadow just went circle after circle. Eventually it stopped and sat facing the camera. I swear it knew what the camera was and just stared at it, stared at me. At some point, I fell asleep after that. When I woke up and checked on them the next morning, both Duke and Daisy had small wounds similar to Diesel's. One on the paw, one on the flank. Nothing life-threatening, but there were small punctures that had not been there before. This continued for several days, small injuries appearing on my puppies overnight. I tried to separate Shadow completely. I put it in a kennel on the other side of the workshop, but the next morning it was back with the litter. The kennel door remained locked though, somehow. By the 4th week, my puppies were not growing as they should. They seemed lethargic, less interested in the solid food I'd been introducing. Shadow, meanwhile, had grown considerably, nearly twice the size it should have been for its age. Its black coat had taken on an oily sheen, and those amber eyes seemed to have darkened to more of a reddish hue in certain lights. I decided to move the entire litter into my house, setting them up in my spare bedroom, where I could keep a much closer eye on them. That first night, I was awakened repeatedly by Sadie's low growls. Each time I went to check, Shadow would be sitting alert while the others were sleeping, and Sadie would be staring at it, hackles raised up. On night 2 in the house, I heard a sound that still haunts me. A low sound coming from the spare room. It wasn't quite a growl, but something horrible. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep in my bedroom, and I rushed to the room. The overhead light would not turn on that night. In the faint light there was, I could make out Sadie cowering under the bed with Duke and Daisy. Diesel and Shadow were in the center of the room. Shadow had pinned Diesel down, standing over him, and when I entered, Shadow turned to look at me. I swear those eyes looked like burning hot coals. I lunged forward with the bat. I wasn't aiming to hit, but to scare it off Diesel. Shadow moved fast, though, running between my legs in the blink of an eye and out into the hallway. Quickly, I closed the door and turned to check on Diesel. He was alive, but he was barely moving. There was a puncture wound visible on his neck. I rushed him to a 24-hour emergency vet in Springfield. But unfortunately, Diesel died on the way there. The vet examined him briefly and said it looked like some kind of bite wound, but not like a bite wound from a dog. The teeth marks didn't match dog teeth. I'm not sure what that meant or how it was possible. When I got home, exhausted and heartbroken, Shadow was gone. I searched every inch of my property for that demon, but there was no sign of it. Duke and Daisy were huddled with Sadie, unharmed but still scared. I checked all the doors and windows. Everything was locked from the inside, just as I'd left it. In the weeks that followed, I installed more security cameras, motion sensor lights, and the works. I slept with Sadie and the remaining puppies in my room. Duke and Daisy gradually recovered, started to grow again normally. I was happy to see them back to their playful selves before long. Eventually, they went to their new homes, and life seemed to return to normal. But on 2 separate occasions after these events, I swear I saw a black dog figure around my house, watching. I think it's Shadow. On the 2 occasions I saw that thing again, I made sure to keep Sadie real close. To this day, I let her sleep in my room with me, and she's no longer part of my breeding program anymore. I want her to live the rest of her doggy days without a problem. Taxidermy haunting. From Tim T. Taxidermy isn't as creepy a profession as people might think it is. But I'll say this now, this story won't do my profession much justice. I started to learn taxidermy under my father when I was only 15. Took over the family business when he retired. And I've been running the business in Nebraska ever since. That's over 2 decades of turning death into something that resembles life. I've worked with everything from trophy bucks to exotic game. The occasional pet for people who can't bear to part with their companions too. People say I've got good attention to detail. It's a solitary profession, which suited me fine after Elizabeth passed. My wife died in 2014 in a car accident. After that, the house has always been too quiet. I focused on my workshop more than anything. Helped me to take my mind off of things. And when you're focused on a project like taxidermy, it doesn't leave much room for wayward thoughts. The measuring, the skinning, the preserving, the mounting, each step is a science itself. This brings me to the commission I got in September of 2020. Mr. Whelan was not a regular client, apparently just passing through on his way back to Wyoming after a hunting trip in the Sandhills. Said his usual taxidermist had retired, and he'd heard good things about my work. What he had for me was an 8-point buck, impressive spread, a clean kill through the heart, the kind of specimen that makes for a straightforward mount. "I'll need to keep the hide for tanning and preparation," I told him. "Should take about 5 or 6 months for a full shoulder mount. I'll call when it's complete." "No rush," Whelan said. I took his deposit. He told me, "This one's special though. Got him at sunset, last day of the trip. Never seen a deer move the way this one did." I nodded. Wasn't really listening, to be honest. Hunters always think their kills are the best or the most special. It's part of the mythology they build around the hunt. I'd heard it all before. After Whelan left, I brought the deer into my preparation room. It was a Friday evening, and I typically don't start new projects until Monday. But I wanted to at least get the cape removed and into the freezer. The initial skinning is best done when the animal is fresh. Something, though, felt off from the very start. The deer's glassy eyes seemed to follow my movements as I positioned it on the table. I told myself it was a trick of the light, but this usually didn't happen with my work. Kind of creeped me out. The skinning went along smoothly enough. I separated the cape from the carcass with practiced precision, working the knife along the natural seams where hide meets meat. But as I pulled the skin free from the skull, the strangest sensation came over me. Like this sudden awareness, like I'd opened a door to some place I was not meant to be. At that moment, the workshop felt darker. I shook it off. I finished up the initial prep, salted the hide, and stored it properly in the refrigeration unit. I disposed of the carcass in my usual manner and cleaned my tools. By then it was well past midnight, so I locked up the workshop and headed to the house. It was a long day that day, and I went to sleep almost right away. But I woke up in the middle of the night to a buzzing sound. This buzzing was not my alarm clock like I'd hoped. No, this was the sound of hundreds, maybe even thousands, of flies. I opened my eyes to darkness, animated by moving shadows. There were thousands of flies in my room, like a big black and noisy, disgusting cloud. I freaked out, fumbling for my bedside lamp. When I finally clicked it on, I saw it for real. Just this untold number of flies covering every surface of my bedroom. Walls and ceiling, clustered thick on the dresser mirror, crawling over the framed photo of my wife. Jesus Christ, I thought. I scrambled from the bed and swatted at the insects that immediately diverted their attention to my exposed skin. I could feel their nasty, tiny feet scuttling across my arms and neck, making me panic even more. I hurried over and opened the bedroom windows up, even though it was so cold outside that night. I grabbed a broom then and began to sweep the dang things towards the opening. This process took nearly an hour, my heart pounding the entire time. When I got the last one through the window, or in the trash if it managed to die, I basically fell over on my bed, trembling and even more tired than before. When I woke up in the morning, I was still so tired. I looked around and noticed how impossibly clean everything was. If thousands of flies invaded your space, and you swatted at them with a broom for a straight hour, you would think you'd find corpses of the things all over the place, even after cleaning much of them up the night before. But I didn't. I know I didn't get them all out, and I know I didn't pick up all the dead ones. And yet, I couldn't find a single one. I even went over to the windowsill and inside the trash can. No flies. I chalked this up to some sort of extremely realistic stress dream. But I'll tell you that staying awake so long to deal with them, I'm pretty sure it was no dream. A better explanation might have been a hallucination. Who knows? That was only the beginning of the experiences. The following night, I woke up again, not to flies buzzing about, but to the sound of hooves on hardwood. A clop clop clopping sound echoing through my quiet house. I lay there, petrified, trying to understand what that might be. It sounded like it was coming from the hallway outside my bedroom, sort of pacing. Eventually it stopped after making it right outside my door. I didn't react. I just waited. The digital clock on my nightstand cast a red glow that read 3:14 a.m. It was right then when the doorknob began to turn, painfully slow. I watched it happen. After it turned completely, the door opened only a few inches, and all I saw outside of it was darkness. A sound came that chilled me to my marrow, like the wet and heavy breathing of a big animal. I swallowed hard and basically tackled my lamp in an instant, turning it on. Light from my room spilled into the hallway, and there was nothing there. I searched my whole house, but didn't find anything out of place. The following morning, I checked the workshop. So far, everything looked fine. I opened up the refrigeration unit, expecting the wheel-in deer hide to be missing, but it was just there, properly salted, waiting for me to do the next step. I got to work right away, hoping that treating it as a routine project would dispel any creepiness that lingered. I removed the hide from the refrigerator, placing it on my work table. I smoothed it flat with gloved hands and measured and marked the areas to be trimmed. As I began to cut, it felt wrong somehow, like I was cutting something that was still alive. Twice, I swear I saw the skin twitch beneath my knife, and once I could have sworn I heard a low moan coming from the skin itself. After a break and coffee, I kept going. I completed the initial trimming before lunch. When I came back, there was fresh blood coming from the skin, just enough to drip onto the floor. There had been no blood on it when I pulled it from the fridge. I decided to call up Whelan. He didn't pick up, but I did leave a message, letting him know that I've decided not to do the commission. I honestly felt a bit embarrassed. He came to me because people were proud of my work, and here I was, letting him down, which might devalue the skin itself after I'd gone partially through it. But the alternative, continuing to work on that hide after everything I'd seen, it was just too much. That night was the worst. I had double-checked all the locks, wedged chairs under doorknobs before going to bed. It was hard to sleep. Took me hours. I was just listening to the house settle, and when I finally did sleep, of course, I woke up in the middle of the night again. I opened my eyes. My bedroom was not empty. Dark, but I could see something there. A figure standing at the foot of my bed, a silhouette blacker than the darkness around it. It had the body of a man, tall and gaunt, but its head was that of a deer, complete with an impressive rack of antlers that seemed to scrape the ceiling. It breathed slowly, so loud. Though I wanted to do something, I couldn't even bring myself to scream. The figure took a step towards me, and in a heartbeat, I jumped for my lamp and turned the light on. The figure was gone. I was out of that bed so fast, checking every corner, looking under the bed, in the closet, like I was a kid again. But there was nothing. I didn't go back to bed. I got dressed really quick, grabbed my keys, and drove to the workshop. I grabbed the wheel-in deer hide. Oddly enough, it felt especially warm that night, like it was still in use. I placed it in a large storage bag, secured it in my truck, and drove directly to the address Whelan had provided in Wyoming, stopping only for gas and coffee. 6 hours later, I pulled up to a modest cabin on the outskirts of Cody. Whelan answered on the third knock, surprised to see me. I explained that I could no longer work on his hide. I handed him his refund, too. He didn't know what to say, and I wanted to get back home, so I apologized and left. It took me a while to want to do any taxidermy again after that. I used my savings to just take a couple of months off. But I've been back to it for years now. Nothing strange has happened again. Taxidermy is my life's work. If I couldn't go back to it, honestly, I don't know what I would do. I can't really blame the deer in that story. You'd better believe if someone killed me during a stroll in the woods and tried to mount my skin over their Keurig in the dining room. Oh, I'm gonna haunt the heck out of you. My curse would be something like making your coffee taste like pee. Not just any pee, it would be my pee. Forever. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tales from the Break Room. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails, and if you have a scary work story you want me to narrate in a future episode, send it to me at eeriecast.com/submit. If you want to support the show, all you gotta do is follow and rate Tales from the Break Room on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And hey, think about pre-ordering my new book, Creepy Campfire Stories. Available now for pre-order and comes out on July 8th, 2025. Go to creepycampfirestories.com or click the link below. Thank you. Until next time, everyone, your horror host here needs some sleep. Even big ol' veiny, Chadley horror narrators like myself need their 14 hours of nightly sleep. See you again real soon.